Good morning, everyone. My name is Sue, and on behalf of the Goochland branch of the Pamunkey Regional Library, welcome to today's program, Saving and Planting Seeds. This presentation is part of the 2022 Horticultural Series developed in a partnership between the library and the Goochland Powhatan Master Gardener Association. Representing the Master Gardeners today, we have Audrey Hirsch, who is a GP MGA volunteer, and today's presenter, Pat Lust. Pat is a retired Longwood University faculty member and a longtime master gardener. She is currently spending a lot of time growing native plants and talking about them. Her backyard nursery focuses mostly on perennials and bushes, but includes a few other types of plants as well. Let's get started. The chat feature is available, so please send us your questions. They will be addressed throughout the presentation. Here is Pat Lust with Saving and Planting Seeds.
Good morning. Well, I guess we're not going to be spending very much time outside today, are we? So let's just talk a bit. Well, all right. There we go. I thought since it's March, we would start with planting instead of saving. Before I got interested in native plants, which is mostly what I do now, I spent an awful lot of time learning about propagation, and seeds are one of my favorites. You're going to see one of my projects in the slides here pretty soon. So I've brought all the knowledge I gained from learning all that propagation, and it's now working with native plants. But let's back up here and, oh, there we go. And little technical issue there. Talk about seeds. So what is a seed anyways? Well, we all are gardeners. We all have planted seeds. We all have saved seeds. And so today we're just going to be talking about some things, and perhaps I will talk about something in a way different from what you're used to doing, or maybe what I say will prompt you to put something in the chat box that I ought to know that I don't know, or we'll make this somewhat of a conversation one way or another. So, okay, this is going to be contrary, I see. There we go. I like to start with this marvelous George Washington quote. "It is miserable for a farmer to be obligated to buy his seeds. To exchange seeds may, in some cases, be useful, but to buy them after the first year is disreputable." Well, we all know that today farmers buy seeds every year because many things have been done to seeds with the hybridization and the genetic modification, and poor George Washington would be horrified. Fortunately,
I don't have any sound.
no sound, huh? Well, I don't know what to tell you about that.
Muted.
Anyways,
Well, they have mute over here.
Okay.
It says mute. So if I hit,
anyways, I'm going to go on while he's doing that. Fortunately, in our own gardens, we don't have to worry very much about the genetically modified and all of those chemically messed with things. We do have hybrids, but we can talk about those in a bit. So what is the seed? The seed is comprised of three parts: the seed coat, the embryo, which is the part that's going to grow, and the endosperm, which is the food source for the embryo for about 2 weeks. And I put this line down here at the bottom about adding fertilizer, because the first 2 weeks, you don't need any additional fertilizer for a seed, because, oops, now I'm going to have to get used to that not working. Okay, because as you can see
that's
in
on
my
mute.
microgreens here,
No, it's not. It's off mute.
as
Well-
you can see with my microgreens here, you don't need anything for the seeds to germinate and grow except water. These microgreens here that you're looking at are probably about 2 weeks old. So the food that was in the seed has provided everything that the seed needs to make that. Okay. Just a little bit of a review. I don't know who is here today. I haven't been able to see the list, but I'm assuming that there are a lot of experienced gardeners here today that already understand what monocots and dicots are. Monocot is the grass sort that the leaf comes up out from the middle and forms the stem that way. The dicot is like the bean, where when it grows up and the first thing you see are the cotyledons of the seed, and then the leaves appear. So let's talk about choosing seeds. What are you going to grow is the first question you have to ask. And then the second question you have to ask is, well, where am I going to get my seeds or plants from somebody else if you do that sort of thing? Probably you all have some favorite seed catalogs. I have my personal favorites, a couple of which I will mention as we go along the way here. But let's not do that now. Oops. It works about every other time. When you're choosing your seeds, now we know what we want and we know what catalog we're going to use or where our source is going to be. Are we going to choose heirlooms or hybrids, or does it matter? If you're choosing an heirloom, what you're going to get is a seed that's open pollinated. It grew out in the open and it pollinated itself. With a hybrid, you're going to get something that has probably been manually manipulated so that it will turn out a certain way. I like to tell the story about my grandfather. Pardon me, but I have to insert a story every now and then. My grandfather in the mid-20th century grew seed corn, hybrid seed corn. And when my mother was a child, she got to help with that. So what they did was they planted 2 rows of one variety, 2 rows of another variety, and repeated 2 and 2. And then they went through and they pulled off, when the tassels started to appear, they pulled off all the tassels of one kind so that that kind would be pollinated by the tassels of the other kind. So all the seed from the rows without the tassels would be hybrid. They would be crossed with another variety. And that was the seed corn he sold. That was back in the mid-20th century. So they do it a little bit more sophisticatedly now, but that's my hybrid story that I love to tell. Another thing you got to consider when you're choosing your seeds is your growing zone. Now this, when I pulled up this chart to preparing to show this today, I got a little bit of a surprise because I grew up over here in Northwestern Ohio. And when I grew up there, it was zone 5. It now is very clearly zone 6. Gee, that's a big difference. Here we're in zone 7. To be specific, I think they call us 7A. Another thing you've got to consider when you're growing, choosing your seeds is the habit. The habit of the plant. The habit of the plant is how it looks. Does it grow tall, skinny, what else? So another thing, if you've saved your own seeds, you're going to want to check for viability. Now, if you're buying new seeds, you should be able to assume that you're buying plant seeds that are viable. And I say if you get a package of seeds that nothing grows, you need to maybe check with your provider and see what was the problem. But I'm going to attempt to go outside this and get a another list. So hold on, we'll see if the technology works here, because I want to talk a little bit about how a lot of seeds will last a lot longer than you might think. Okay. Can you see Johnny's seeds now?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Johnny's Seeds is one of my favorites because they're one of the seed companies that provide a lot of educational information. In this particular page, it's a link on your handout. So you can go to this, and as I scroll down, it says average storage life. And let's go down to vegetables here. Let's look right down here. Let's go to cucumber. cucumber will last for 3 to 6 years. So if you've stored some seeds 5 years ago and you just discover them and they're cucumber, you're going to say, I wonder if they'll still grow. Well, the chances are good that they will, at least some of them will, because it says 3 to 6 years viability. Now, not everyone's going to grow because they lose some viability every year, but that is what the scientists have decided. Now go 2 rows up here to corn. Sweet corn doesn't last quite as long in terms of viability. So I'll let you go to that on your own, and I will come back to see if I can find the right. Hot dog, that's where we left off. So I just want to tell another story about viability. Some years ago, about 10 years ago, I think I read an article about some archaeologists doing some excavation in Illinois, in a place where Abraham Lincoln had lived, and they were digging in the outhouse. And they had dug down and, you know, the residue that had been left, and there were some undigested tomato seeds. So they planted them and they grew. You can actually get that variety now. I'm sorry, I can't tell you what it is, but you know, if you do the research, you'll be able to find them, and you can actually get that variety that has been revived from 150 years later, or maybe even more. So sometimes viability is way more than you think it might be. Check for mold and mildew and other pests. All sorts of things can get in. I mean, rodents can get in and ruin the seed. If you put it away damp, you're going to have all sorts of other things. And then we're going to talk a bit about seed dormancy. I don't know, maybe that's the next slide. Let's find out. Oops. Yep, it is. Seed dormancy is a condition that's built into seeds to prevent them from growing at the wrong time. You know, there are certain seeds that fall from the plant in the fall or late summer, while it's still warm enough and moist enough to grow, but they don't. They wait until next spring to germinate. That's a built-in protection that's called a seed dormancy. What breaks dormancy? I love this word, imbibition. Imbibition breaks seed dormancy. What is imbibition? Well, it's water getting into the seed and making it swell up and the embryo to spring forth. A couple of ways that you can do this Mother Nature has it all under control. Mother Nature drops the milkweed seed in the fall. That milkweed seed has to go through the cold winter to germinate the next spring. If you pick them in the fall and plant them in the spring, not going to grow. Mother Nature has it programmed to do right. So if you do pick them in the fall and want to take them inside, you can use a process called stratification to fake them out and make them think they've been through winter without it being so. So let's see if I can find the arrow here. So there are 2 means of breaking that dormancy in a seed: scarification, which you can do mechanically or chemically. I never do it chemically. Well, actually, I'm into native plants, so I don't do either of these. I let Mother Nature take care of it. But if you want to speed things up or you get out of sync somehow, you can use these. Scarification is simply damaging the seed coat so that the water can get inside the seed, so that imbibition can occur. That's all scarification is. You can use sandpaper. You can poke a hole in the side. I had a grower once tell me that with the bigger seeds, he used his electric drill and drilled a hole in the side. I tried it, and you know what? It works. So any way you can to break that outer shell so that the water can get inside. Stratification is an after ripening sort of thing where the plant thinks it's going through a cold season. And so you have to use a refrigerator or even the freezer to accomplish this. And there are a lot of plants. You know, I mentioned milkweed. Another one that requires a dormancy, a cold period outside or artificially, if you want to do that, is black cohosh. Some of you grow that. It's so beautiful when it blooms in the woods. Now there's my nursery. Now you can see that I don't do any stratification or scarification. I plant this. The one on the left is a couple of years ago, and if you look really closely, you can see things are growing there and up there in the middle on the right. This is a little later in the season when I've taken the chicken wire off. But this right here on the right is what my backyard nursery looks like right now. I have about 60 varieties of native plants sitting out there waiting to break dormancy. So we hope that at least the high percentage of them will grow. The reason for the chicken wire, the first year I started in with native plants and having them germinate outside and planting them over the winter and all, I had not very good germination. Sitting in my backyard, wondering what went wrong. And I see the bird fly up to the side of the pot and have lunch. I thought, oh my, not a germination problem. It's a birdie buffet problem. So that's why the chicken wire. Soil. I mentioned a little bit earlier that you don't need any fertilizer for growing seeds. You do need to prepare the potting soil. When I plant my seeds, I use just a generic potting soil that I buy at one of the box stores. That's just what I do. It's important that the soil be loose and room for air and water to emerge. And this particular slide that you're looking at right now, I lifted on purpose from a presentation I did 5 or 6 years ago, before we were talking so much about no-till gardening as well as no-till farming. And probably none of us do this mass tilling like we used to do 10, 15, or 40 years ago. Pretty much now we dig up what we need to dig up and not everything. So that's not something I recommend. It's just a slide I found and I thought you might get a kick out of it. Oh, planting depth. I forgot to mention that. And here's why I mentioned dicots and monocots. With dicots, your beans and things, you want to plant them about the depth of 1.5 times the size of the seed. So with a bean, you know, that's about somewhere between 1/4 and 1/2 inch. With the smaller seeds, mostly I just sprinkle them across the top and pat them down a little bit and then go with just a little tiny bit of soil. With monocots, you want to plant them just a little deeper, maybe twice as deep. Monocots like corn, you want just a little bit deeper. A good seed mix. I mentioned lightweight with air spaces in it. That's really important. Sterile soil is important. Now, when you're planting outside, you take pretty much what you get. Some people do a solarization process where you put black plastic over it and let the sun bake out anything that might be in there that could be harmful. I don't do that myself, but it is a process you can do. So yeah, lightweight, able to absorb the water. Got air spaces in it because they do need air as well. And I put this slide in here because, and ignore the part in green for right now because that's more information than we want to talk about. But if you look at the tomato, if you're going to plant inside, your tomatoes you should plant about, there it is, about 6 weeks before you want to plant them outside. But look at the peppers, take 8 weeks. I have made this mistake more than once. I plant my tomatoes and peppers at the same time and then get mad at my peppers because they aren't ready. Well, there are these charts, and you can see that this chart that I have on this page is from the Virginia Tech Gardening Vegetables website. I recommend that you all go there and cruise around because there's a lot of information there. All right, now here's something that I'm a little confused about because I had checked plant maps and said that the last average frost would be May 11th to 21st because that's what they said. And I got a lot of disagreement about that. So I went and checked a couple of other sources, and you can see where there's some disagreement about that. Virginia Tech publications actually give, for our county, April 4th to the 15th as the last frost date. I'm not sure I'm going to take their word for that. The Old Farmer's Almanac says April the 29th, which is one that I've heard a lot of you say. And so for me, and I know there's some Goochland Powhatan Master Gardeners on here. For me, I'm going to say, as soon as you get rested up from Spring Garden Fest, time to plant. Let's see what's next here. Oh, and don't ignore the information on the back of the packages. They often have a lot of information there, which is very useful. And we're not going to go into all of this information at this time, but I just want to say, check it out. Be aware of whether what you're planting is a cool crop or a warm crop. Warm weather seeds, cold weather seeds. If you warm weather seeds, a good example is your tomatoes. Now, when we get to planting inside, I'll talk a little bit more about how I do it. But with the tomato plant, tomato seeds, if you don't have a high temperature, if you're planting them inside, you might want to have a heat mat or something. If you plant them outside too early, they just won't germinate. If it's not warm enough, they will not germinate. Likewise, with your cool weather crops like lettuce and broccoli, if it's too hot, they won't germinate. They need cool temperature to germinate. So the germination of these plants, these seeds, is dependent on proper temperature as well as imbibition. Oh, okay, so let's talk about starting inside. I happen to live in a house that has those hot water radiators that have a flat top. So when it's time for my tomatoes seeds to go in, I put them in the little flats, and then I set them on top of the radiator. And it takes about 2 days until I have them germinated. Once they're germinated, you got to get them in good light. I do have a grow light at my house, so I get them right under that grow light right away, because once tomatoes plants get 2 inches tall and fall over, it's awfully hard to recover them. So when you're in the process of germination, you got to watch them so that when they germinate, get them under a powerful light right away. I don't know how many of you have greenhouses, but there are several ways you can start inside. If you have a greenhouse, you're all set. If you have a grow light system, you're pretty well set. If you don't have either of those, you can still start some things inside, but you're going to have an awfully good window, because light for first germinated plants is really very important. And whatever you do, planting inside or outdoors, be sure you label every container. And I put that in capital letters there to catch my own eye as well as yours. Nothing like having a flat of plants and not being sure what they are. I've done that. It's not fun. So label your plants. And starting seeds outside, well, of course, you'll have to start it a little bit later, but maybe the seeds will catch up. And things like beans and corn and squash, you're probably not going to want inside. I laugh at the idea of transplanting corn, but my local nursery here has corn stalks in little 6-packs for you to transplant. I grew up on a farm. We would never have thought of transplanting corn. You put it in the ground, you let it grow. Likewise with the beans. But tomatoes and peppers are the main things that I like to get started ahead of time so that you can transplant those. A lot of people just go to the nursery and buy them already started, which is, you can do that if you don't have an indoor facility. Now, where's that arrow? Why seeds don't germinate? Well, it could be that they're too wet. If they're too wet, if the ground soil is saturated, there can't be any oxygen there. and they do need oxygen. Or it could be too dry, where imbibition is not possible. Remember, a seed is not going to germinate until water gets inside the seed. Or if they're planted too deep, most seeds don't need light to germinate, but they need light immediately after they have germinate. And then, of course, there's the possibility that the seeds are no longer viable. So there are your environmental factors that are necessary: water, temperature, light, and oxygen. Now, if I have a cute little video, and this is probably better for children, but I just like this myself. So if I can get it up here, I'm going to play it for you. Now, maybe this will work. There we go. I just think that's a cute video, and so I always have to share it. I hope you enjoyed it a little bit. All right, damping off. Damping off is actually a fungal disease, but it occurs when there's too much moisture and the soil, maybe the soil isn't sterile, and it can happen. And when it happens, it's all over. Once the damping off starts, the plants are going to just die. You can see the graphic on the right there. That's what it looks like. I even had, I like to grow those microgreens. I even had a bunch of, a set of microgreens suffer from damping off once. I got them too wet. I didn't have any air circulating. And the next thing I knew, they were all just curling up and folding over, just like that graphic. So, you know, it's the preventions are kind of like all that powdery mildew and everything in the summer. You got to have good air circulation, avoid overcrowding, and don't overwater. Those are the same principles that will keep you from having the damping off. Transplanting. And I always stick this in here because when you're talking about seeds, you probably, except for those that you grow outside like corn and beans and all, you're probably going to be transplanting them. It's really, 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 really important that you never touch the stems of the plants that you are transplanting. Why? Because the plant can grow more leaves if you happen to break a leaf while you're transplanting it. But if you break the stem, it's over. So I plant mine in those pots, so I have to separate it at the roots. So I very carefully massage the roots to get them apart, being very careful not to touch the stem and to touch the roots as little as necessary. Just get them apart. And then I pick them up by one leaf. That's all I touch. One leaf, make a hole where I want them, stick them in, and pat the dirt down around it. And that's it. What about fertilizer? Well, when you plant your seed out, or your seedling out, what do you want to grow first? You want the roots to grow first. What does fertilizer do? It makes the tops grow. So when you plant your seedlings in the ground, wait a few days before you fertilize. Let the roots have a chance to do a little bit of their thing before you start feeding the tops. Hardening off is a process when you have the plants inside. You take them out and kind of gently get them outside, and maybe take them out during the day and during the night for a couple of days, and set them close to the house and then move them a little closer, so that you gradually get them acclimated to being outside of the house. If you've grown them outside to start with, this is not necessary at all.
Pat, we have a question. Can we cover that right now?
You must have read my mind.
So Kate asks about using half toilet paper rolls to make mini planters to start seeds, and then you just plant the whole thing. And I've also, we've seen that with newspaper and with peat pots, and she wonders if that would work.
Well, that's an interesting question, and I don't know the answer to that, but I will say, whenever I have bought a pot that is supposed to disintegrate when you put it in the ground or anything like that, it has not completely disintegrated, which inhibits the roots. So I say it's worth a try, because it would be convenient and inexpensive. Save your toilet paper rolls for a year, cut them in half, put a little dirt in and plant them. I say it would be worth it. If I were doing it that way, I would gently cut that toilet paper off before I put it in the ground, because it does inhibit the roots, and you really want those roots to go. Now, it will eventually disintegrate, but I don't know how fast. So someone else who's on this conversation might have tried that. I have not. Anyone?
Connie asks if a small bathroom type paper cup would work, and then take the bottom off and use it as a planter, so that the roots actually have some room to expand out the bottom. Could you comment on that?
Well, the cups usually have a little wax on them or something, which I think would probably prohibit good growth. If you took the bottom out, the roots could then go down. But, like I said, I myself would take the root ball out of the container and just plant the root ball. That's what I would do. Connie, you may have some experience doing that, and it may work perfectly fine. And I say, if it does, go for it. There are a lot of things with gardening that you just got to try. If it doesn't work, try something else. That's my dad's favorite line. Well, try it, see if it works. If it doesn't work, try something else.
Any other questions before we continue? All right, I think we're ready to go on.
Well, now we shouldn't discount all the other ways that seeds are spread. By wind, by animals, by pollinators, and or by insects sometimes, mice and ants, all sorts of ways that seeds get spread. All right, let's see. I think that's the end of that section, and we get to talk about collecting seeds now. Collecting seeds is an interesting thing. I think it's really great to be able to collect some seeds and to share some seeds from my own garden with somebody else. So I just think that's a wonderful thing. I like quotes. A September ritual that is good for the planet and your soul. So we'll say that's what collecting seeds is. Some people collect seeds because they save money. And that's the truth. If you have a big garden and you liked your crop of beans last year, you'd best save some and plant them again next year, unless they were hybrids. And then you don't want to, because you don't know what you're going to get. Another good reason for saving your own seeds is indeed preserving that genetic strain, that heirloom natural strain. And also when you have the open pollinated, you have better genetic diversity. So it's a good thing to do. Selecting the best, and I'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to tomatoes down the line, because yes, when you're going to save seeds to plant next year, you want to save the best, not the puny plant, because, you know, I can't talk about what genetically is going on in there, but you know that there is some reason. Like I said, it's a satisfying activity. And I really, really like saving seeds. So Seed Savers Exchange, and some of you may be familiar with this. It's a research facility in Decorah, Iowa. And they started out mostly as a research thing and a membership thing. You can be a member of the Seed Savers Exchange and contribute and be involved in their research if you want. Or you can just buy seeds from them, because us buying seeds from them is what supports their research work. But they also, since they do a lot of research, they have a lot of educational material. Now, see if I can get us to this one. Oops. All right, I've done something wrong here. Let's try this one. Yes, if you click on the link that I gave you on your handout, it will take you to the Seed Savers page called Learn. And when you scroll down, you got all these choices of garden planning tips, seed starting tips, plant care, pollinators, soil, and even seed saving. So I recommend, if you're one who likes to read all these things, especially from an agency that's been doing a whole lot of research, that you check out Seed Savers Exchange. Now, when you're going to save seeds, there are certain things that you need to be aware of. And we're going to talk, I think the next slide talks a little bit about isolating plants. But do know whether or not you're saving something that's a hybrid. If you want to save something that's a hybrid and see what comes of it the next year, you know, you certainly can do that, but don't count on it being what you would expect. Grow some extra. If you want to save seeds, grow some extra. We'll talk a little bit about harvesting at the right time. Well, let's talk about harvesting at the right time. When is the right time to harvest a plant? Harvest the seeds of a plant. You see in the photograph to the right that they're looking at, it looks like marigolds to me, maybe not. But you can see that the seeds are brown, and when you grab a hold of that pod, it's going to come right out. Those seeds are ready, they're ripe. But I say the best time, you know, the best time to harvest a seed is the day before the birds decide it's right. And that's just, you know, you got to kind of figure out what that is. Select viable seeds. I already said, choose a good plant, not one that's just sort of in the back and not doing much, because you'll want seeds that are going to be viable, that are actually going to grow next year. And then, of course, dry thoroughly before storing. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So isolating your target plant. How are you going to isolate your target plant? Well, by distance is one thing. If you're going to plant two different varieties of beans that you want to save both kinds, don't plant them next to each other. Plant one on this end of the garden and one on that end of the garden. Or separate them by time. Plant one set now and another variety 3 weeks later, or so that they are not blooming at the same time and sharing each other's pollen. Know what cross-pollinates with what. For example, if you're growing carrots for seed, make sure that you don't have any wild carrots, better known as Queen Anne's lace, around, because carrots are promiscuous and they will cross. And then using barriers like, well, maybe a high fence or a cover over some of them of some sort. You can, I don't have any good suggestions for the covers, because I don't use any of those myself. But you know, some people have those high tunnel things where you can plant some here and some there, or a fairly high fence, or again, the distance. A house on two sides of a house would be a barrier. I think we already said enough about hybrids. I don't know, maybe some of you create your own hybrids. It's kind of fun. I've had friends do this, that do the hand cross-pollination and then come up with something unique the following year. If you're doing that, you're a pretty advanced gardener, and I don't have much to offer you today. But you know, I hope we do have some advanced gardeners who are doing that sort of thing. So, planning to save your seeds. Well, it looks like I've covered most of this already, but if you're going to save seeds, start with something easy. Start with beans or corn or something like that, rather than something that has tiny seeds. And then as you become more skilled at saving seeds, work up to the harder stuff. Think about what kind of plants you have. Are they annuals? Are they going to produce seed the first year and then die? Are they biennials? Are they going to produce seed not until the second year and then they're going to die? Or are there perennials that are not going to produce any seed the first year, but then they'll produce seed every year after that? So you need to know what kinds of plants you have as you're planning to save the seeds. You also probably want to know what kind of plants you have in terms of the flowers there are. Now, I apologize to all the master gardeners who are listening today, because I know you already know all this stuff, but I think it's important to know that there are perfect flowers and there are imperfect flowers. The perfect flowers have both female and male parts in the same flower. It's your marigolds, your beans, and most of the things you grow in your garden have perfect flowers. And some of them are capable of self-pollination, and the rest of them require insects to get in there and jiggle the pollen around. The imperfect flowers mean that one flower is male and one flower is female. The male flower does not have female parts, and the female flower does not have male parts. And then this group, this imperfect flowers group, is divided into two subgroups, the monoecious and the dioecious. The monoecious are like your cucumber, where you have a male flower and a female flower on the same plant. Monoecious means one house, male and female on the same plant. Your dioecious are like your asparagus or your ginkgo trees, where you have one plant that has the female and another plant that has the male. And that's when it requires more than one plant to get fruit. With your cucumbers, it's just that you're not going to get as many fruit as you have flowers, because only the female flowers are going to make the fruit. You need to think about how pollen travels. Some pollen is spread only by insects, and some is spread by the wind. For example, you all know the goldenrod story. Goldenrod pollen does not make you sneeze because it is heavy and falls to the ground, while the ragweed that's blooming at the same time is a dioecious plant, female flowers over here, male flowers over here, and it is cross-pollinated by wind. Another thing that is a dioecious plant that's pollinated by wind is hemp. If you happen to see a hemp field when it's pollination time, it's like a giant yellow cloud. And so that's how it gets pollinated. We talked about harvesting at the right time and selecting viable seeds. I put this tomato here because with your beans, when you save your bean seeds, you've saved your bean seeds, you don't get any food. With your tomato, you can choose the prize, you can eat it, take the seeds out before you eat it, and then you can save the seeds. Now, I think I have another slide here about those kinds of seeds. So beans are easy. You know when they're ripe because you shake them and they rattle. Tomatoes, as soon as the tomato is ready to eat, the seeds are ready to harvest. And then I think the next slide is some flowers we can look at. Okay, we already talked the marigold. When that's ready, you can just pull it out. With some other plants like nasturtium, it has big seeds. You don't have to worry about getting it at the right time because the seeds fall to the ground. You can still see them and pick them up. But this third photograph that I have here is Cardinal Flower. The seeds are really, really, really tiny, like dust. So when it looks about like this and the first little pods start to pop, you want to take a bowl or a plate or something and go out and get under and cut off little sections and catch it in some kind of a plate or container, and then let it dry there and then shake the seeds out. And they're just going to look like dust. You're not going to think there are any seeds there. You think you just got dust, but they're seeds. With fleshy fruit, you can go online and find all kinds of recipes how to deal with fleshy fruit. But the essence of it is that you put the seeds in water for a little while so that the membrane separates from the seeds, and the membrane and the not viable seeds float to the top, and the viable seeds, because they're heavier, will float to the bottom. And then of course you got to let them dry thoroughly after that. Sometimes you're going to want to harvest something a little bit early. For example, the photograph here is Impatience. Impatience is a seed that when it's ripe will explode in order to send its seed all over the place. That's how it propagates itself. So any plant like that that's going to explode, you're going to want to get the seeds a little bit before they explode. You can see when they start to have little bits of gray on the seams, or brown on the seams. Get them, take them before they pop. And sometimes timing is inconvenient. For example, if you think that your seeds are going to be perfect a week from today, next Saturday, and your area is expecting a hurricane on Tuesday, you're going to want to get those seeds picked before that hurricane comes through. So I heard a woman in Vermont talking, a person who is a professional grower, talking about this. She said, when you need to pick seeds early for some reason, take the whole stem, because while you're not going to have the plant to keep sending energy to the seeds, there will still be a little bit in the stem, and it's worth the trouble of taking the stem as well. So dry thoroughly, clean, and label. Label your plants, label your seeds, make sure that you know what you got. I mean, after you do it for a while, you'll recognize the seeds and you'll recognize the plants, maybe. And then what information you put on the package is up to you. Store in a cool place, make sure they're labeled, organized, know what you've got, so that when you go to it to get it next spring, you're going to know what you got. And that brings us right back around to where we started, and all the same things that we just started with. And that's all I have.
Are there any questions? I have a question. So we've been talking a lot within our Master Gardener group about native plants and not invasive species. And I know that our invasive species are pretty persistent in terms of spreading their seeds. Do you have any tips or tricks about preventing our invasives from sending seeds?
Yeah, that's really interesting. That reminds me of last week. I went out and was pulling I have a lot of moss on the north side of my house, and if I don't get the grass out early, I can't get it out of the moss. So I was out pulling that, and in a space of about, I suppose 12, 15 feet, I pulled out probably 12, 15 small English ivy plants just growing there. Now there's not any English ivy close to that place. So, you know, we've all been talking about English ivy being invasive. Well, I've got proof in my own yard. The problem, why it's there, is that's where I have a black chokeberry and a red chokeberry. So those birds went down the street somewhere and had some English ivy seeds. And then they came, oh, look here, chokeberries. Let's have a chokeberry. Well, let's poop out our English ivy. So I had quite a crop of English ivy. Now, how do we prevent it? That's a very good question. The best way we can prevent it is getting the invasive plants out to start with. The reason they become invasive plants is because they find that they can thrive here. As a matter of fact, most of them thrive as invasive plants better than they do as native plants wherever they're native. There are plants like garlic mustard. That is, oh, I can't remember if it's an annual or a biennial, but if you can cut off the blooms, I mean, if you have a large patch of it, you're going to have to pour a lot of glasses of wine for your friends to help you decapitate it, but you can. I mean, that doesn't guarantee against the birds bringing in more, but you can certainly cut down. With something about like ailanthus, it's going to reseed itself. So even picking off all the seeds will help, but that's not the only way it propagates itself. Ailanthus spreads by underground, I don't know if they're roots or rhizome. I don't know exactly what they are, but it spreads underground. And so you've got to kill the whole plant of something like that. So invasive plants are as different as our native plants in terms of how they grow and how you can manage them. But you know, I would say if you got an invasive plant in your yard that's blooming, get the blooms off before they set seed. Yes, since we're talking about seeds.
And we have a comment and a question. Connie asks, what method do you use to check the viability of seeds that may be over a year old?
Well, you know, that's a really good question. I get to tell another story on my dad, my dad, the farmer. And back in the 50s, when we were doing it this way, it was before all the before farmers bought all their seeds, when farmers really did save their seed for the next year. It would come about this time of year, my dad would come in with a handful of corn and a handful of beans, maybe 2 or 3 of each, and grab a handkerchief and roll up the seed in the handkerchief and then wet it and put it on a saucer and wait for however many days he expected to germination, and then check to see, and he would count. If he would have 10 seeds and 5 germinated, that would be 50% germination. So that's what I know. You know, you can use your microgreen growers to check because, you know, you know, how many seeds do you have and how many seeds do you want to use to check to see if they germinate? And once they germinate, can they be used? I don't know. I don't do that myself because I always have so many seeds that I can just plant a bunch of seeds. And I'm a real no-nonsense gardener. My philosophy of gardening is plant lots of stuff, something will grow. So that tells you a little bit about me. But you really can check viability by selecting a few of the seeds. I'm assuming if you're saving seeds, you have a big enough supply that you can take a few and do a test run with them.
Then Kate has a comment, and it's a really useful comment, I think. She says that Lewis Ginner Botanical Gardens Library has a seed library where anyone can go and check out seeds. I think they may ask that you bring seeds back the next year.
Well, that's wonderful. I did not know that. Thank you, Kate.
And Kate, I know, is a master naturalist who spends a lot of time at Lewis Ginner, so she has direct knowledge.
Oh, Lewis Ginter does some great works. They also have some other lists about, I know they have some lists about seed viability there because I've seen one of them. And they have a lot of, you know, there are a lot of places where there's a lot of good information where people have tested out things. Or if you're the experimental type, test them out yourself. It's fun.
And then we did have a question about where the handout is located, and I think I'll ask Sue to respond to that.
Yeah, I'd be glad to address it. Pat mentioned a couple of times a handout that she's been nice enough to put together. You can view it or print it from the library's website and just follow the same path that you did when you went to register. Go to the calendar and click on today, or you can click on our icon, the link for the YouTube channel, and when you find today's recording, it will be there also.
And are there any more questions for today? Or comments? All right, not seeing any.
Okay, well, Pat, thank you so very much for your informative presentation. We really appreciate the time and effort you took to share your expertise with us this morning. And if our participants know someone that wasn't able to join us today, please let them know that the recording will be accessible through the library's website by selecting the adult heading on the homepage, or again, by going to our link to our YouTube channel. And also don't forget that the library has great resources for its gardeners in the branches and through the digital library. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us. Please join us again on Saturday, June 11th at 10 a.m. when Pat will return to talk about regenerative gardening.
Okay.
Thank you all for joining us. See you on June 11th.
Hold on 1 second before we go. I just want to give a plug for our Master Gardener Spring Garden Fest. Here we go. Spring Garden Fest is an annual event. We do it in conjunction with Reynolds, the horticulture department at James Sargent Reynolds Community College. We have a plant sale. The college has a plant sale. There's all kinds of webinars, and I believe there might still be some openings to join the webinars. The classes are $25. We have vendors, and there are tours. It's just a wonderful, wonderful day. It's April 30th from 8 to 3. And then we also have 2 upcoming Master Gardener webinars in conjunction with the Powhatan Library, and those are coming up in April and May. Unfortunately, I don't have those right in front of me, so I can't tell you exactly what the dates are, but I will, you know what, well, I don't have those dates in front of me, unfortunately.
Hold on. Let me
Audrey,
take my screen down.
this is Connie. Hi,
Yes,
I just
Connie.
wanted, I appreciate your slide and your plug for the Spring Garden Fest. I just wanted to point out that the $25 registration fee allows you to take 3 classes. It's not $25 for 1 class, it's $25 for 3 classes and or workshops. And we'll also have some vendors and some music being played out at the campus. So if you've never been to the Goochland campus of Reynolds, it's a beautiful campus. They have lots of gardens that you can stroll through and see what they've been doing. All you need to do is, if you want to register for the classes, you can go to our website, which is on that slide that Pat just showed. I mean, Audrey just showed, or just come out for the day. It's free.
Thanks
And,
for that,
buy
Connie.
some plants. Thanks.
Okay, well, Audrey, do you see any more questions or anything else you want to add before we sign off?
I don't.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us today, and hope to see you on June 11th.